MAME! What an exciting thing! A full, fresh MAME folder is a vast voyage of discovery, and as it's illegal to have games you don't own on your hard drive, that voyage is being taken on a pirate's galleon. There are near 4,000 games in this folder I have here, and only half of them are either mahjong, fruit machines, pinball displays, Tiger handhelds, and all that other nonsense. When you first start out on your fresh new MAME folder download, you'll explore your favourites from when you were a pubeless whelp. Chase HQ, Robocop, WWF WrestleFest, Final Fight, the classics. Then, with your nostalgia gland empty, dripping and floppy, you'll try out something based on a thing you liked as a kid. That Spider-Man game that Sega put out that you never got to play. Atari's Temple of Doom, perhaps. G.I. Joe by Konami, potentially. Some will be disappointing, some will be a pleasant surprise. The ones I've mentioned I all enjoy. After that, you may end up working through the history of your favourite arcade manufacturer. Could it be Sega? That will take some time to go through, won't it? So will Taito or Capcom. But then what? When you've finished all that, like I have, what do? Do you go outside and sit in the park playing a game where you award yourself points for making eye contact with a passing dog? No. You go deeper into that MAME folder. You look at the beaten track of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game and Pac Man and The Simpsons and all of those, and you look at the nettles next to that beaten track and you decide to leap into them, into that great unknown where you get really itchy and everything's sore because you shouldn't jump in nettles. And in that unknown there is not a great deal of quality, but there is a lot of weird. And that is what we're going to look at today. Because I drink that weird down and it makes me sick, and I do continue to do it anyway because I'm a little bit weird too. So the idea of this video is that we won't find any of the major companies here. There won't be any Sega, Capcom, Konami, Data East, Taito, Tecmo, Technos, Atari, Bally Midway or Namco. These companies have their own fair amount of weird games too, as anyone who has played Escape Kids by Konami or I'm Sorry by Sega can testify. The most recognisable games on this list I'll be covering are Jaleco and Leyland, the B-list celebrities of the arcade manufacturing world. They would be a guy who won X Factor 3 years ago, whose two main jobs of the year were singing in a gay club for 50 quid in February and turning on the Christmas lights of a provincial village. The rest of them are as obscure as the last place finisher of an early 2000s Big Brother, or the man who drinks alone in Wetherspoons from 11 AM to closing. When I came up with this idea, I had no idea about any of the games that I've featured on this list. You may well have heard of them before, but I had not. So here then are 10 odd efforts from some of the, well, you tried arcade companies of the last 30 years then. So let's begin with a game and its sequel, Thunderhoop. Made by a Spanish company called Jaleco, not to be confused with Jaleco, Thunderhoop was a 1992 coin-op with a real Euro platformer aesthetic. With the faux anime lead character, Thunderhoop has a switchblade look to him, and the graphical style of his cutesy biofreak enemies is definitely something you can imagine being on the Amiga or Atari ST, courtesy of a Gremlin or an Ocean. And hey, I have it on good authority that Spain is in Europe, so its Euro platformer credentials are not in doubt, but certainly a rare thing to find in an arcade.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The story is that the eponymous Thunderhoop was developed in a laboratory to combat the creations of Professor Genbreak, who was forbidden to create weird creatures in his lab, because of course he would be, because making creatures in a lab really isn't okay and not normal. I'd say that Thunderhoop is one of the better games on the list, with its level design feeling a bit like a pound shop early Mega Man, and I'm alright with that. Special mention to the death scream though, an out of place fatal roar that I'd call blood curdling, but I resist using that phrase because I can't find any examples on the internet of screams curdling blood, and so I've always found that to be a bit of a silly phrase. Also, top marks to Thunderhoop for having purple sperm as an anniversary. They could be tadpoles, but tadpoles don't go in the air, where I'm sure sperm do. I've seen several sperm flying past my face. Yeah, let's go on. Released the same year in 1992 because Gallico don't hang about apparently. Thunderhoop 2, otherwise known as TH Strikes Back, well, that's had a bit of a change up apparently. Never before has a sequel flipped so much on its style so quickly. Gone are the chibi squashed Euro platformer sprites in favour of edgelord style visuals that have a real heavy metal vibe. By heavy metal I mean the animation from the early 80s. And it backs it up with all the ultra gore and well shaped ladies that come with that film. If you haven't seen it, do so. It's really weird but a bit of a classic. The story of TH Strikes Back is that Thunderhoop has grown up, as it's set 10 years later, and now he's protecting a sample of his own DNA that the villainous and a nipply guard are planning on stealing to turn into an evil army of super beings. Hey, Thunderhoop, aren't you best off running away with that sample? I mean, your whole body is a DNA sample of you. Don't help them out by going towards them, even if you're a hardy soul. Gameplay has had a complete rejig as much as the graphics, with the game having a very strong Contra 3 vibe, and again, it's solid enough. If this came out on the 16-bit computers of the time, I reckon it would have been quite highly regarded, despite its garage band warming up guitar music. Whether or not it would work so well on consoles or in the arcades itself, yeah, I'm not sure. But let's just look at that turtle's face as it tries to turn you into goo by running at you backwards. It's charming, isn't it? Next up, we've got Van Dyke. Oh, how you doing, Mary Poppins? I've had some pickled eels in old London town, I have. No, not that Van Dyke. There's no diagnosis going on here, murderous or otherwise. Made and published by Universal Playland, who actually put out a game I've heard of, Atomic Robo Kid. Van Dyke is that most rare of beat-em-up genres, a top-down brawler. A cross between Golden Axe and Commando, Van Dyke is actually a bit of a treat to play. Because I've got to get the good ones out of the way first, I guess. You're a barbarian, you see, and I presume a burly ancestor of Dick, and you have to march upwards to get to your eventual triumph, fighting the usual fantasy bestiary on the way. Creatures such as giant scorpions and giant toads and giants. On the way, he can equip various power-ups and weapons such as a flail, and it's as a game, it's spectacularly okay, majestically alright, brilliantly mediocre. I like it, as Paul Daniels once said, not a lot, but I like it. Next up, Mustache Boy, a game I selected from the MAME list purely because of its name. Mustache Boy is a 1987 maze game made by a company called March, who released this one game before piecing out of the whole video game business altogether. What a legacy to have, a game that no one remembers. Mustache Boy is a solid name, no matter how you look at it. It reminds me of some of those under-16 soccer teams that the Asian countries used to put out, which were full of entire teams of teenagers with luxuriant moustaches. The guy on screen, he's a newer footballer, he's 16, he plays in the Indian League, apparently 16. I can't grow facial hair like that and I'm in my 40s. Bastard. But we digress, as there's no hairy lip soccer going on here. In fact, our lead character wears a helmet during the main game, making the whole moustache thing largely pointless. The gameplay is a bit of a mix between Cavern and Pac Man, with the boy touching tiles in order to change their colour whilst evading enemies, whom you can also leap over. If you touch every tile in the level, you go on to the next level. So far so Cavern-y. I generally find with simplistic games such as this, if you get the controls correct, you're halfway there. And Mustache Boy, it's no different. It's perfectly playable and nowhere near as wacky as the name suggested, but that's okay. A fine game indeed. One game that isn't very playable and is fairly garish and horrible to look at too is The Burning Cavern. Released in 1987 by a company called EFO, the game originally shipped on the rarely used floppy-based magnet system. Your first mission is to land your UFO on a strange planet in a sort of lander type game where the thruster doesn't work very well. And yes, I constantly fail to do that. If you fail at it though, it doesn't matter. You merely lose a life and the game carries on with the UFO just sat there like you landed it properly. I did not land it there properly. I was terrible. Don't reward me, game. Then a lady emerges and you assume you're in control of her, but you're actually not, as she is snatched away by some hungry looking purple death bat. And so our hero then does emerge belatedly, probably after turning off the hob in the UFO or flushing the toilet or something, and he has to go and rescue her using his incredibly short range pistol and his grappling hook that's really difficult to use. What follows is a god-awful cinematic style platformer, not a good one like Flashback, but out of this world, which was terrible, and I won't hear that it was good in any way, shape or form. It's just my opinion, but Out of This World is shite. Sometimes the platforms drawn that look like other platforms aren't platforms at all. It's got a poor jumping system, it's got janky controls, and it has frustrating insta-deaths. Way too many frustrating insta-deaths. On MAME you can fill up the imaginary arcade machine with fake money. But if you saw this game in the real world and you put money into it, you'd feel ripped off doing so, getting rid of your 10p's for 5 seconds of gameplay. It's terrible. Do not play Burning Cavern. Much better than Burning Cavern is The Amazing Adventures of Mr. F. Lee, an early title by Pacific Novelty in 1982. That's Mr. F. Lee. Mr. Flea. Oh, well done. How mirthsome. There are 4 canine-based minigames in Mr. F. Lee to choose from here, as your tiny blood-supping protagonist seeks his dog-based hemoglobin dinner, including running up a steep Dalmatian's back and swinging from tail to tail to presumably get to the tastiest pooch. Why don't you just have a nibble at the first tail you get to, you fussy little git? The game is clearly influenced by some of the best known titles of the time, with Donkey Kong and Frogger being particularly obvious. For some reason, Why Do Fools Fall in Love plays on the Donkey Kong stage, maybe showing some sort of inner conflict within Mr. F. Lee and the dangers of his addiction to the plasma of Labradors. I don't know, maybe once again I'm overthinking things. That seems to be my thing. Pig Out Dying Like a Swine by Leyland is pretty good actually. It's not particularly flashy looking for an early 90s game, as you and your porcine friends escape from a butcher's and try to accrue as many calories as possible in the varying single screen city levels while you avoid the attentions of the wolves, the butcher that initially trapped you, and other city dwellers. It's crisp to control, it's very enjoyable, and I made it through this whole mini bit without making a single pig-based pun. I am really proud of myself. Baconiously, I don't pork myself up enough for chopping out the puns. I've got to the sausage where I usually go on and gammon with the hog jokes. Yes, the bit's done now. Developed but unreleased by Jalico, and undoubtedly the weirdest game antagonist in any game I've ever played, Chimera Beast casts you as a microscopic organism from outer space called an eater, who has descended upon Earth along with 6 other eaters who make up each of the bosses of this otherwise quite ordinary playing scrolling shooter. You're entrenched in a war of rapid evolution as you progress from microbe to fish to bird to mammal to mankind on your race to be top of the food tree of the universe. Power-ups are gained by eating enemies with extra arms, fleshy drones, shells and the like being awarded for you for chomping on the right beastie. I think it's got a clever, if horribly bleak plot and cool power-up system, but other than that, Chimera Beast is pretty average to play. The attract sequence of Mad Donna greets you with a silhouette of a parked biplane with its logo bouncing about over it. Then it cuts to a couple of cartoon goofs having a shootout, one of which is your character, the other is that of an antagonist. And then you get a gentle pan down a random photograph of a pair of naked human lady tits.
Don't go thinking you're going to see any human boobies here. There are no human boobies on YouTube, you must know this by now. Maybe a bit of boobie, but no nipple. Areolas are not okay. So please, carry on watching the video, but don't expect to see a single dark bit of breast or a lumpy bit on top of it.
Now, not made by who you think it's made by, and it's not made by the Korean masters of soft porn Comad, they of Fantasia and New Miss World and all of that, but instead it was made by a company that put out 3 games. They're called Tuning Electronic, and yes, all of their games feature a small amount of porn in them. Most of the game is a pill collecting maze title, as your British hunter type protag collects regenerating pills to clear the level, using smart bombs and his gun to fend off the derpy dinos and hordes of evil Santa Clausi? Whatever. It's unpolished, but not dreadful. Poor, below average perhaps, but not terrible. And on clearing the stage, you get acquainted with the lady lumps that greeted you at the beginning of the game. This time attached to a lady's face. A very pretty lady, usually. If you go through the next stage and clear that one easily enough, well, you get the same picture again, which then pans down and keeps going down. And I don't know why that lady's perched a small, tiny Cornish pasty between her legs. I mean, she might be hungry, but that's not very hygienico. Voila, the bearded clam. Pac Man's grown his hair out during lockdown. Yes, low-res images of lady gardens are here for the intrepid Mad Donna player. I'm not sure if they explain who the Mad Donna of the title is. Maybe one of the new ladies didn't get the paycheck she was expecting. So yes, Mad Donna, it's okay. But as with all these softcore games of the early 90s, I haven't put a lot of thought into the gameplay. They're just sort of making up for it with track sequences and rewards of ladies' muffs. And finally, and staying on the theme of nude ladies, we get to the Piece de la Resistance, Loverboy by Global Corporation Tokyo. Loverboy is a very competent Pac Man clone. If we were judging Loverboy on gameplay alone, Loverboy is pretty good. It is a very good Pac Man clone. But, boy, is it a big butt. Bigger than Nicki Minaj's butt after she lets herself go in her 60s. The game, it ain't right. It ain't right at all. You see, your role in the game is to have sex with ladies while avoiding the police and police dogs. And you run after them and you're nude. Save for a fedora, because of course it's a fedora. And the ladies are screaming for help as they run away. So, I know we're in a different time period from the 1983 release of Loverboy, and it was only released in Japan, and they can be a bit fruity, shall we say, in their opinions regarding the old in and out. But I can't see this as being alright even there, even back then. Surely, especially as when you do catch the young ladies with romantic intent, let's say, there's a let slip and a runaway bar for each of the two participants in the next mini game, with which your aim is to max it out with the ladies to clear the level, meaning you've done a big orgasm in them, which is a bit of an unhealthy way of saying that you can win a lady over that you're doing the forced sex with if you're good enough a swordsman with your old ejaculatory rod. That's not a good message, is it? That one makes me feel a bit ethically itchy. So, with Loverboy making me feel all awkward and awful, it's time to draw this video to a close. I hope you've enjoyed this brief sojourn to the darker corners of MAME, and please enlighten me with any other interesting curios I might have missed for a potential follow-up video. You're just going to give me all those co-mad games, aren't you? I've seen them all. I know that you can be Saddam Hussein and Robocop. There's a whole video about it that I've done, if you look at that link there. Anyway, Kay, thanks. Bye.